Hi, Shadow Work fam. So, as promised last Sunday, I put together this short and sweet guide on how I personally like to do an I Ching divinatory reading, which I highly recommend as a form of finding guidance. So, whenever I'm feeling really lost about a situation and like I need insight, and especially to clear my mind around endless overthinking about multiple different viewpoints, I find this practice can be very nurturing and grounding and helps give me a sense of direction. So let's dive right into the method. There are many different ways that you can perform I Ching, but the most common are the yarrow stalk method, which you can see pictured above. And this is very complicated and prolonged. This was one of the original methods used. And there are lots of online videos explaining how to perform that one if you're interested. But for me personally, I use the 3 coin method. So for the 3 coin method, you can use fancy coins like the ones that I pictured here on the bottom left. These are the ones I use, and I enjoy adding the element of sacredness and ritual to my practice. Like I keep my coins inside of a little fancy treasure chest that I open up, and it sits on my shelf next to my beautiful big I Ching reference book. I'll sometimes light a candle, and um, my friend that taught me how to do I Ching actually uses a quill and ink specifically for the purpose of doing I Ching readings. And that's something that I want to implement in my practice in the future too, because it really adds like a sacred, mindful presence to the ritual. But with that being said, none of those theatrics are actually necessary, and I've performed plenty of readings on a whim just using quarters. So it works just the same. You really only need the coin to have a front side and a back side, so a heads and a tails. And that's because one side is going to correspond to yin in the reading, and the other side will correspond to yang. So after we flip our coins, we are going to write down a series of yin and yang lines. The yang lines are just one straight line, and the yin lines are a broken line. So they have a gap in the middle. And then after 6 rounds of coin tossing, you end up with something that looks like what I have pictured here. We call this a hexagram. So you see in the tattoo above, there's the Ouroboros, snake eating its tail, and in the middle is a hexagram where it has 6 lines of either straight line yang or broken line yin. And then in the bottom, we have 2 hexagrams, one 6-line hexagram above, another 6-line hexagram on the bottom. So the theory behind the I Ching is really fascinating. If you're interested, I highly recommend looking into it. But for this video, I'm going to keep it practical. All right, so once we have written our series of yin and yang lines correspond to the hexagram of 6 lines, we're going to open up a reference guide. Now, this is just to give you a quick overview before I'm actually going to guide you through a reading, but just so you know the whole big picture first. So once you have your hexagram, you open up your reference where it shows all 64 hexagrams. I like to use the reference that I find in my book. It just shows, I open up here near the front, I keep my little bookmark there. Oops. But you can see it's basically just this picture that you have above. Mine has a little more detail because it tells me the elements and the name of the hexagram on this page, which is pretty cool. Let me see if I can get it close enough for you to kind of, let's see. Well, the elements are kind of up above here. You see it has lake, fire, etc. But um, yeah, this book is The I Ching the Oracle by Benabel Wen. But there are also plenty of tables online, like the one that I have pictured here. Something we need to know in order to use that reference table, the one that's pictured on the bottom, is that a hexagram is composed of 2 trigrams. So the upper trigram is the upper three lines of a hexagram, and the lower trigram is the lower three lines. So just to put that into perspective, let's look at our tattooed guy from earlier. You can see that the upper trigram, I circled it in red. I also circled it in red in the table where it says upper trigram on top on the chart. And then the lower trigram, I circled both of those in yellow as well. So when I meet them in the middle, I get hexagram 48 as my divinatory response. So at that point, I would open up my chosen interpretation of this hexagram. I use my book, but you can also use a website and you can also use AI. I do think that while learning, AI does a really good job of interpreting it. I do think that as you start becoming familiar, you can rely a little more on your intuition. I think it's also cool if before you consult AI, you do try one of these other methods just to get a feeling for what your own intuition is telling you about it. So initially, I think it's good to consult a few different sources until you kind of get the flavor of each hexagram. But for instance, in my book, when I turn to hexagram 48, um, oh, there we go, hexagram 48, it's called the fountainhead. Other sources might have a different name for it, but it's going to be the same flavor. So in another place, I know it's known as the well. And this is about being able to access the deep internal resources that are available to us in life. So at this point, I'm going to guide you through a reading. And if you would like to learn how to do this, I invite you to pause the video, go grab 3 coins and a pen and paper, because that's all you'll need. And I think that's going to be a really great way of learning, just to do one yourself so you can see how easy it is and just follow along as I do my reading right now. So once you have your materials, you think of a question that you would like to seek insight into. I recommend the question, what do I need to hear right now? So let's start off by flipping our 3 coins one at a time. So you might need to just pause and restart the video as you do your own coin toss, and I'm going to do it here with you too. And we're going to record our answers in the form of yin, broken lines, or yang, straight lines, starting from the bottom and going upwards until we have our own 6-line hexagram. You can then refer back to this table that I have posted on the left. It's going to show you the 3 coins and what kind of line you need to draw. So you have obviously your 2 tails, 1 head being a straight yang line, 1 tail, 2 heads being the broken yin line. And then if you get 3 tails, up on top you see that one, you get a broken line with an X in the middle. That is called a changing line. It's a changing yin. If you get 3 heads, then you're going to have a changing yang, a straight line with a circle. So let's do our first coin toss. I also wanted to mention this hexagram that I drew in the red box. That was just so I can show you the number of the lines. So you can see line number 1 is considered the bottom one. Line number 2, covered up by my video, is that yin line that I drew. Line number 3, the one above that, the yang. Line number 4, it's one of the changing lines with the X in the middle. 5, a yang. And 6, another changing line. So I just drew that so you know the order of the lines, because we do, in our reading, we do refer back to the specific lines. Each of them does have a signification within the reading. So I did my first coin toss and I just got a straight line, a yang, as my first response. I'm going to do my second coin toss now. So for my second coin toss, I got another yang, which I put above my first yang. For my third coin toss, I got a yin, so I added that on top of my 2 yangs as a broken line. And that completed the lower trigram, those first 3. Now we're going to start on the upper trigram. So for my fourth line, I got another yin. This starts off our upper trigram here. For my fifth line, I got my first changing line. This is a changing yang line. I'll show you what to do with those later if you get any of those. For my sixth line, I got another changing yang line circle with line with a circle, and that completes my hexagram. So if you got a hexagram that has a circle or an X in it, like I did, then you will actually have two hexagrams as a part of your final reading. What this means in a reading, it's just more information. It means the more changing lines you have, so the more of those lines have a circle or an X in it, the more flexibility and possible change there is in your response, because another name for the I Ching is the Book of Change. It's all about flow, right? Yin and yang are constantly flowing, and the world is not stagnant, but it's ever shifting. So for our first hexagram, if you got two hexagrams, if you got one, then just go ahead and use the reference chart to figure out which one that is. But if you do have changing lines and you need to have interpret two hexagrams, then for our first hexagram, all we're going to do is we're going to read it as if it doesn't have an X or a circle in it. So just a straight line with a circle is just a straight line. A broken line with an X in it is just a broken line. That's going to be your first hexagram. And then to get your second hexagram, you're going to go ahead and take those lines that have a change in them and transform them into its opposite. If it's a yin, broken line, change it into a yang, straight line, and vice versa. You can see that in the chart directly above me, right here, how they did that. So at this point, you should have either one or two hexagrams, and you're going to refer back to your chart, the one that I have posted here on the left. And using that chart, you can discover which lines, which number hexagram, which of the 64 hexagrams corresponds to the reading that you got. So for mine, this is what I started off with, and then equals. So what I got is 9, which transforms into 19. And in my book, I have a little subtitle on what they called it in the book. Every interpretation is going to call it something different, but it'll always be the same flavor, the same reading, really. That's why I recommend that initially you do discover uh, you read a couple of different from a couple of different places, whether it be from different books or different websites, just so you can get the deeper root of the meaning. That's just like tarot, how you have one card, you like for instance, you get the Fool card, and everyone will interpret the Fool differently, and that doesn't mean that one person's interpretation is the right one. They'll all be similar to each other, but the true meaning of each hexagram or tarot card is actually the underlying interpretation, the archetype behind it, which the every single explanation is trying to explain to get you to understand. And like I mentioned earlier, now once you have your numbers from your reference table, you're going to open up your book or your online website, or you can even use AI. I will post one website that I thought was interesting. So truthfully, I don't usually use websites in my interpretation. So I don't have one that I really recommend, but a brief Google search showed me one that has mentions of Carl Jung. So I thought it was interesting. So I'll post that one in the comments just in case, but you're welcome to do your own research or use AI if your philosophy aligns with that. So if you watched all the way till here, I hope that I was coherent enough and that you got some value out of this, and please share your results with me. I would be so excited to hear how it went for you. And for a few closing remarks, I wanted to make a few comments on our favorite psychologist, Carl Jung, and the sort of thinking that the I Ching is based upon. So I know most of us here are huge fans of Jung's work, and you probably know that his work was heavily influenced by Eastern thought. But something most people don't know is that Carl Jung was very into the I Ching and astrology and other divinatory methods. So in his book on synchronicity, for instance, he cited the I Ching multiple times. He also wrote the foreword to one of the most popular I Ching Western translations, which I placed a picture of here. I Ching, the Book of Changes, the Richard Wilhelm translation, with a foreword by C.G. Jung. So if you do want to understand more of Jung's thoughts around the I Ching, I will post a link to where you can read that foreword. It's really fascinating. But basically, Jung argues that the I Ching operates on a fundamentally different worldview from Western science. So instead of asking why something is happening or seeking causes like we tend to do, instead the I Ching asks, what is the nature or quality of this moment and how does it relate to the question that's being asked in this moment? So Jung saw this as reflecting an ancient Chinese understanding where events occurring at the same time share certain qualitative characteristics with each other. So when someone consults the I Ching, like we just did, Jung believes that the hexagram that emerges through that random casting of coins corresponds meaningfully. So you're basically simulating a synchronicity in that moment. How cool is that? It corresponds meaningfully to the psychological or situational moment of the questioner. And that's not because one caused the other, but because they share a qualitative similarity in that moment. So that's all I have for now. Thank you again, Jordan, for challenging me to make this video and to share. It has been so much fun, and I will see you all around the community.